The hospital smelled like bleach and burnt coffee, which was how Maren Odell knew it was almost 4 in the morning. She had been on her feet since 7 the previous evening. Her compression socks had stopped helping somewhere around midnight, and by 2 a.m. the dull ache in her lower back had sharpened into something with an actual pulse. She was 28 years old, and she moved through the corridors of St. Augustine Medical Center like a woman twice that, sliding past gurneys and supply carts with the automatic efficiency of someone who had learned to conserve every movement. The overnight shift at St. Augustine was not glamorous work. It never had been. The emergency wing at 4 a.m. attracted a particular category of human being: the uninsured, the frightened, the ones who had waited too long at home and arrived now with problems that had graduated from inconvenient to catastrophic. Maren had spent 18 months doing this work, and she had developed a capacity for calm that surprised even herself. Her mother called it a gift. Her nursing supervisor, a woman named Patterson, who communicated primarily through sighs, called it useful. Maren called it necessity. She needed this job. She needed it badly enough that she had not taken a single sick day in those 18 months, including that Tuesday in March when she had come in with a fever of 101, and Patterson had sent her home 3 hours into her shift, and she had cried in the parking garage because 3 hours meant she would be $60 short on her loan payment. The loan was her sister's. Technically, biologically, Daisy was 23 and had started nursing school the previous fall, which Maren had considered a personal victory given that she had spent 4 years convincing Daisy she was smart enough to go. The scholarship had covered tuition, the living expenses, the textbooks, the lab fees that the scholarship committee had apparently not considered. Those had gone on a payment plan that Maren had co-signed without hesitation and that had been consuming roughly $400 of her monthly income ever since. She did not regret it. She told herself this regularly. She was reminding herself of it again, standing at the nurse's station and entering vitals into a chart that refused to load correctly, when the ambulance bay doors opened and the paramedics brought him in. Maren noticed him the way she noticed all trauma arrivals, clinically before anything else. Male, she registered. Tall. The kind of tall that made the gurney look undersized. Dark jacket, expensive cut, soaked through with rain and something darker. The paramedic nearest her was a man named Torres who had been running overnight transport for 6 years and who did not, as a rule, look shaken by the things he transported. Torres looked shaken. GSW, upper right chest, Torres said, and Maren was already moving. Vitals are stable, but he lost significant blood at the scene. No ID on him. Refused to give a name. Maren fell into step beside the gurney. The man was conscious. That was the first unusual thing. People with gunshot wounds who had lost significant blood were not typically staring at the ceiling with the particular quality of alertness he was displaying. The kind of alertness that was not confused or panicked but watchful, controlled, like someone who had decided to allow this to happen and was monitoring it carefully. His eyes moved to her face. They were very dark, and they held her gaze for exactly 1 second before sliding away to assess the rest of the room. "Sir," Maren said, "I'm Nurse Odell. Can you tell me your name?" He said nothing. "Are you allergic to any medications?" "Nothing. I need you to squeeze my hand if you can understand me." He squeezed her hand. His grip was controlled, deliberate, not the weak flutter of someone fading, not the desperate clutch of someone frightened. It was a handshake, brief and precise. "Okay," Maren said, "that's good. We're going to take care of you." The attending on call was Dr. Sato, who arrived still knotting the drawstring of her scrub pants and assessed the wound with the speed of someone who had done this hundreds of times. The bullet had passed through cleanly. That was the good news. The bad news was the volume of blood loss and the fact that their mystery patient appeared to have been field-dressed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Whoever had packed that wound had done it correctly. Someone in his life had known how to do this. "He needs blood, he needs imaging, and he needs someone to get me his medical history," Dr. Sato said. She looked at Maren. "See if you can get a name." Maren pulled a chair to his bedside while the other nurses moved around her, establishing the IV line, connecting the monitors. Up close, in the fluorescent brutality of the trauma bay, she could see him more clearly. He was somewhere in his 40s, she thought, though it was the kind of age that was difficult to pinpoint. Not softened by years, but hardened by them. There was a scar along his jaw, old and faded, and another one partially visible at the collar of his ruined shirt. His hands, when she checked his pulse, bore the particular kind of calluses that had nothing to do with manual labor. "I know you can hear me," she said, keeping her voice low and even. "I'm not asking for anything that leaves this room. I just need to know if you have any conditions I should know about. Blood thinners, pacemaker, anything." He turned his head and looked at her directly. Up close, his eyes were not simply dark. They were the specific shade of brown that read almost black in low light, and they held an expression she could not immediately categorize. Not hostility, something more like evaluation. "No conditions," he said. His voice was low, slightly roughened. European accent, she noted, though she could not have said from where. "Thank you," she said. "Name?" The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Not tonight." She noted it in the chart as John Doe and went back to work. He was in surgery for 2 hours. Maren's shift ended at 7 a.m. and she spent the last of it doing a handoff notes and trying not to think about the man in OR 2, which was a losing battle from the start. There was something about a person who arrived without a name, without a history, without any apparent fear of their own mortality, that snagged in her brain and refused to let go. She was pulling on her coat at the staff exit when Patterson stopped her. "The no-name GSW is out of surgery," Patterson said. "Stable, he's asking for you." Maren looked at her. "Me specifically," he said, and I quote, "the nurse with the dark hair who didn't ask too many questions." Patterson's expression communicated that she found this both irregular and mildly irritating. "You don't have to go." Maren went. He was in a private room at the end of the post-surgical corridor. Someone had already transferred him there, which was unusual for a John Doe. Private rooms cost money, and unidentified patients were typically assigned to shared wards until their billing situation clarified. She filed this away without comment and knocked on the open door. He was awake. He was always awake. She was beginning to suspect. He had been propped into a semi-reclined position, and he looked marginally less like a man who had recently been shot, which was not the same as looking well. The hospital gown sat on him with the particular wrongness of a garment placed on a body that had no business wearing it. "Nurse Odell," he said. "How do you know my name? Your badge?" She looked down. "Of course." She stepped into the room and stood at the foot of his bed with her coat still on, which felt like a reasonable boundary to establish. "You're doing well for someone who lost as much blood as you did." "The surgery went smoothly." "I know. The doctor told me." "Then what can I do for you?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of someone searching for words, the silence of someone deciding how much to give. "You made a decision last night," he said. "When Torres brought me in, you could have called the police immediately. GSW with no ID, that's protocol." Maren said nothing. "You didn't," he said. "I noticed." She had noticed too. She had followed protocol in every other respect. The treatment, the charting, the documentation. But she had not called the police in the first hour, when the attending had looked at her, and very deliberately not given the instruction to do so, and Maren had made a choice that she had not fully examined yet. "The attending made that call," she said. "The attending looked at you first," he said. "And you shook your head." She had. She was not sure why. Something about the way he had squeezed her hand, controlled, deliberate, present, had made her feel that whatever had put a bullet in him was not the kind of thing that improved with police involvement. An instinct. A bad one, possibly. "You have a name?" she asked. "Nikolai," he said, and then, after a beat that felt like a concession, "Brack." She filed it away. "Mr. Brack, is there someone I should contact?" "No, you're going to be here for at least 3 days. The wound was clean, but I know how long I'll be here." He looked at her steadily. "Nurse Odell, I'd like to ask you something." "You can ask. The shift differential for overnight nursing at this hospital," he said, is approximately $6 an hour over the standard rate. You've been working nights for 18 months. He paused. That's a significant commitment for someone your age. The specificity of it sent a thin wire of unease through her. How do you know how long I've worked here? I don't, he said. I'm estimating from your badge number. The sequencing at St. Augustine is chronological. Yours was issued in 2024. He said it without emphasis, as if this were a perfectly ordinary thing to deduce at 7:05 in the morning while recovering from surgery. You're here because you need the money, not because you prefer nights. That's true of a lot of nurses. It's true of you specifically, he said. I wanted you to know that I'm aware of it, and that I don't intend to be a burden. She stared at him for a moment. Then she said, Get some rest, Mr. Brack, and walked out of the room. She thought about him on the bus home. She thought about him while she ate cereal standing over her kitchen sink. She thought about him when she woke up at 2 in the afternoon and lay in the grey light of her apartment, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that had been there since March, and that her landlord had identified as on his radar. She was back at 7 that evening. He was still awake. This became a pattern over the 3 days of his recovery. Maren worked her shift and she checked on him with the frequency appropriate to his condition, which was less frequent as he improved, and each time she entered his room, she found him in the same state of contained watchfulness. He slept, presumably, at some point during the day. The day nurses confirmed it, but she never saw him anything less than fully present. He read on a tablet that appeared in his room on the second day. He made phone calls in a language she thought might be Ukrainian, keeping his voice low and his expression flat. He ate what the hospital kitchen sent him with the methodical commitment of someone refueling rather than dining. On the second night, she asked him what he did for a living. He smiled at that, a real one this time, brief and slightly crooked, with the quality of something rarely deployed. Import and export, he said. What do you import? Various things. And what do you export? Consequences, he said, and then looked mildly surprised at himself as if he had not intended to say that. She laughed before she could stop herself. It was the last thing she had expected to do in this man's company, and it clearly surprised him as much as it surprised her. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, and then looked away. Your sister, he said on the third evening. Her name is Daisy. Maren went very still. How do you know about my sister? He did not answer immediately. He was looking at the window, at the city lights visible through the glass. Then he said, I asked someone to run a background check. It's a precaution I take with everyone He stopped. Everyone who provides me with care. The wire of unease returned, sharper this time. That's not something I consented to. No, he said, it wasn't. He looked at her. I found nothing that concerns me. Your sister is in nursing school. You co-signed a private loan that carries a 12% interest rate, and you've been managing the payments alone for 6 months because Daisy took a reduced course load after she had a difficult semester. He said it the way he said everything. Without inflection, like he was reading from a file. It would be paid off in 4 more years at your current rate. Maren's jaw tightened. Is this the part where you offer to pay it off? Because, no, he said, quickly. More quickly than she expected. No, that's not. He paused and she watched him choose his next words with unusual care. I wanted to understand why a woman with your specific skill set is working nights at a public hospital instead of one of the private facilities on the north side. He looked at her directly. The answer is that the private facilities don't hire nurses who graduated from Mercy Community College. They prefer university programs, which is a prejudice without clinical basis. But it is what it is. A beat. You graduated top of your program. You're very thorough for someone recovering from a gunshot wound. I'm thorough regardless, he said. She held his gaze and held it, and then, despite herself, she sat down in the chair beside his bed. Who shot you, Mr. Brack? A man with a business disagreement. Is he going to try again? The smile reappeared, small and involuntary. He is not in a position to try again, she absorbed this, and the men I've been seeing in the hospital lobby since yesterday. The ones in very nice coats who are not here visiting any patient I can identify." He looked at her for a long moment. "They work for me," he said finally. "They're here to make sure the man's associates don't attempt something inconvenient." Maren nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She stood up. "I need them to move to the second-floor waiting area. They're blocking the main entrance, and one of them stared down a woman who was trying to reach the pediatric check-in desk." Nikolai Brack looked at her with an expression she would later spend a considerable amount of time trying to name. "I'll have them relocate," he said. "Thank you," she said. "Try to sleep." He was discharged on the morning of the 4th day. Maren was not there. She had the day off, and she spent it doing laundry and paying bills and listening to her neighbor's television through the wall and trying to feel normal. She was mostly successful. She found the envelope 3 days later. It was in her work locker, which required a code to access. Inside was a single card, no letterhead, and a number handwritten in clean block print. On the back, in the same handwriting. For when it becomes a problem. She did not call the number. She put the card in the zippered pocket of her work bag, where she also kept her emergency $20 bill and her sister's photograph, and she told herself she would throw it away when she got home. She did not throw it away. 6 weeks later, at 2 in the morning, she was finishing a double shift when Patterson appeared at the nurse's station, with an expression that was not her usual configuration of weary authority. Patterson looked, for possibly the first time in Maren's acquaintance with her, uncertain. "There's a situation," Patterson said. The situation was this. A man named Greer, who had arrived 3 hours earlier with what he claimed was chest pain and who had been admitted and monitored, and whose chest pain had resolved itself to the satisfaction of the on-call cardiologist, had been found in the pharmacy storage room on the 2nd floor. He was not alone. He had with him a colleague whose presence in the hospital was not medically motivated, and together they had removed and concealed on their persons a significant quantity of a controlled substance that had gone missing from locked storage. This was not itself unusual. Drug theft from hospitals happened with grim regularity. What was unusual was that Maren, walking to the staff exit with her bag on her shoulder, turned the corner to the stairwell and found herself looking at Greer's colleague, who had apparently taken a wrong turn in his exit strategy and was now 3 feet from her in an empty corridor with a bag she recognized from the pharmacy storage room and an expression she did not like at all. "Keep walking," he said. Maren's brain ran the calculation with the speed of someone who had spent 18 months at a hospital that served a neighborhood where this type of calculation occasionally became necessary. He was bigger than her. She was closer to the stairwell door than he was to her. There was a crash cart 20 feet behind her and an emergency call button on the wall between them. She hit the call button. His hand caught her wrist before the sound finished echoing. His grip was nothing like Nikolai Brack's. It was the grip of someone who used force without precision, pressing into the bones of her wrist with a pressure that made her breath go short. "I said keep walking," he said. Maren hit him with her bag. This was not a calculated tactical decision. It was a reflexive one, the bag swinging up from her shoulder and catching him across the face, with the full weight of 3 liters of water bottle, laptop, and the collected paperwork of an 18-hour shift. It stunned him enough for her to wrench her wrist free and push through the stairwell door. She made it to the 3rd floor before she stopped, back against the wall, wrist throbbing, and found the card in the zippered pocket of her bag. She called the number. He picked up on the 2nd ring. "Maren," he said, which meant he had saved her number, which meant the card had been waiting for exactly this. She told him what had happened, quickly, with the compression of someone who worked in an environment where verbal efficiency was a survival skill. He was quiet while she spoke, and quiet for a moment after. "Are you hurt? Bruised wrist? I'm fine. Where are you now?" 3rd floor stairwell. "Stay there," he said. 2 minutes. She almost pointed out that 2 minutes was not a reasonable time frame for anything to happen. But she was also standing alone in a stairwell at 2 in the morning, with a bruised wrist and the distant sound of Greer's colleague making his way through the door below, so she stayed. It was 4 minutes, not 2. The colleague made it to the second-floor landing before he stopped. Maren, looking down from above, watched him stop. She could not see what he was looking at. She could hear the sound of a brief conversation occurring very quietly, and then she could hear nothing, and then she could hear footsteps ascending toward her. Nikolai appeared at the landing below hers. He was wearing a coat. He was alone. "The stairwell is clear," he said. "My people have him." She sat down on the step because her legs made the decision before she did. What's going to happen to him? He'll be turned over to the police. The drugs he took will be recovered. He came up the remaining steps and crouched in front of her at the level of her face, which felt like a deliberate choice, bringing himself down rather than standing above. "Let me see your wrist." She held it out. He examined it with the same thoroughness he applied to everything, pressing gently along the bone until she hissed at one spot and then releasing her. "Not fractured. Ice tonight." "I know," she said. "I'm a nurse." "You are," he said. He was looking at her in the way he had looked her in the trauma bay, the evaluation, the categorization, something underneath both that she had not been able to name then and was not going to attempt to name in a stairwell at 2 in the morning. "You hit him with your bag." It was expedient. "It was," he said. He almost smiled. "You're not particularly frightened." "I am," she said. "I'm excellent at not showing it." He looked at her for another moment. "I know. She should have asked how. She didn't. How did you get here so fast?" 4 minutes from a phone call." "I wasn't far," he said. She absorbed this. "You've been watching the hospital." It was not a question, and he did not treat it as one. "I told you there were associates," he said. "People who work for the man who shot me aren't always willing to accept that a situation is resolved. I wanted to be certain the hospital was safe. You wanted to be certain I was safe." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said, without qualification or softening. Just yes. Maren's chest did something she elected to categorize later. "How long?" 4 weeks. You've had people watching this building for 4 weeks without telling me." "I considered telling you," he said. "I decided it would either frighten you or make you feel you had to refuse. Neither outcome was useful. That's not your decision to make." "No," he said. It wasn't. He said it the same way he had said it about the background check, acknowledgement without apology, the particular candor of someone who knew exactly what they had done and did not intend to pretend otherwise. "I'm telling you now." She stood up. He stood with her, and they were very close in the narrow stairwell, closer than they had been in his hospital room, closer than she had expected to be, and he did not step back. "The police are going to want a statement," she said. "Yes, I'm going to give them one. I know, and I'm going to tell them everything that happened from the moment I encountered him in the corridor." "Good," he said. Something in his expression shifted. "Maren." He said her name differently than anyone else said it. Not Maren the way her mother said it, or Maren the way Patterson said it, but something precise and careful, like he had decided how it should sound and was committed to it. "The loan. Your sister's loan. I know you said you didn't want. I don't. There is a clinic," he said. "Private. The north side. They are looking for an overnight charge nurse with your specific qualifications, and they are not especially concerned with which school issued the degree. The position pays 30% more than your current salary." He paused. "I may have mentioned your name to someone who knew someone." She stared at him. "You didn't ask me to," he said. "I understand if—" "How long ago?" 2 weeks. She kept staring. "Did you look at my file again?" "I look at your file regularly," he said, with the composure of a man who had apparently decided that the only approach available to him at this point was complete honesty. "It's a habit I'm aware is inappropriate." "Mr. Brack," she said. "Nikolai." "Nikolai." She tried it. It fit. "What exactly is it that you want from me?" The question hung in the stairwell between them. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he was going to deflect, categorize it, give her a version of an answer. Instead, he said, "I don't know. That's the honest answer. I have very rarely in my life been uncertain about what I want." "You are an exception." Maren looked at him. She thought about the card in her bag. She thought about the 2 minutes that had been 4 minutes and what it meant that he had been close enough for even that. "There's a coffee machine on the 3rd floor," she said. "It's terrible coffee. I'm going to get some before I give my statement to the police." He looked at her. "All right, you can come," she said, "if you want to." He walked with her to the 3rd floor. They stood side by side in front of the coffee machine, and she pressed the button for the dark roast and handed him the cup and pressed it again for herself. The hospital hummed around them, the ordinary machinery of a building that did not stop for anything. "The clinic," she said. "Is it a good place to work?" "I've been told so," he said, "by people who have no reason to say so if it weren't true." She drank her coffee. It was, as promised, terrible. "I'll look into it," she said. He did not smile, but something in the way he was standing changed, a very slight easing, like a door settling into a frame. "Good," he said. The police arrived 20 minutes later, and Maren gave her statement with the precision of someone who had been trained to observe. She was thorough. She told them about the corridor and the call button, and the bag and the wrist. She told them about Nikolai, that she had treated him as a patient 6 weeks prior, that he had been in the area and responded to her call. She did not tell them that she had his number saved in her phone as NB, or that she had looked at the number at least once a day for 6 weeks without calling it, or that standing in the stairwell a foot away from him had felt, despite everything, the context, the hour, the bruised wrist, the general improbability of all of it, less frightening than she had expected. That was not information relevant to the investigation. The morning came, as mornings did, without announcement. The east-facing windows at the end of the post-surgical corridor went pale grey and then pale gold, and Maren stood in that light for a moment before she put on her coat and picked up her bag. Nikolai was waiting in the lobby. He was not waiting, obviously. He was standing near the window with his phone in his hand, with every external appearance of someone who happened to be there. But he looked up when she came through the corridor doors, and for a second neither of them moved. She walked toward him. He met her halfway. They went out into the morning together, and the city was just starting and the air was cold. And she could feel where her wrist was going to bruise, and none of it felt exactly like she had expected her life to feel when she was 23 years old, and co-signing a loan, and telling her sister that she was smart enough for anything. But she was beginning to think that was all right.